Hi guys, Aaron here with Ghost Raptor Gaming and Guns. One of the things that has always kind of eluded me is a 1911 that I really like. And typically there are so many boxes that I want to check for a modern 1911. And unfortunately, ones that do check all those boxes for me tend to be very expensive. $1,500 and up. I mean, the ideal one for me would be a Dan Wesson Specialist Commander optic ready model, which is about $2,500. And since I don't usually have that kind of money, I've been looking for more budget-friendly options that at least check most of the boxes that I've been looking for. And again, even those that do check most of the boxes tend to be about $1,500. So, being a little more budget-minded, when I was looking around for different 1911s, I found this guy right here. This is the Tisas Night Stalker 1911 in 45 ACP. Now, this particular model is also available in 10mm as well as 9mm, and I got this one from D&L for $750 even. Now, what is my relationship with Tisas? I have no relationship with Tisas. They don't know that I exist. They didn't send me this. Again, I purchased it with my own money. So, we're going to go through this gun the way I always like to do, front to back, top to bottom, talking about the features and caveats of those features as I go through it. And I just want to go over a few specs first, and then I'll show you what you get in the box. So this is a 5-inch barrel model. It has a forged barrel, it has a forged slide, forged frame, it has Series 70 Colt style of internals. It weighs 2 pounds 4 ounces, which is fairly heavy. It is a pretty much what I would call a GI spec plus, meaning that it has a lot of GI spec features to it and then a few upgrades, versus a completely hand-fitted ones with different systems on it. This comes in a platinum gray Cerakote. It has a front night sight and a rear U-notch. So we'll start there and we'll talk about
the Tisas Night Stalker 1911 comes with the hard plastic case, owner's manual, lock, chamber flag, disassembly tool, a couple of cleaning tools, 2 8-round mech guard magazines, and of course the Tisas Night Stalker 1911 in 45 ACP.
So the first thing I want to talk about is the front sight. The front sight is a night sight variety. It has a green tritium insert. It's surrounded by an orange ring. And the rear sight is a U-notch, typical of what you would see on like a Canik TP9. Equal height is easy to achieve. However, the downfall for me on this sight is that the rear sight doesn't have tritium inserts. It's completely blacked out. And I think if you're going to have night sights, you should have tritium inserts in your rear as well. Otherwise, it kind of defeats the purpose of having a night sight. The one thing I do like about it is it has this hard shelf right on the back, so you can rack that on hard surfaces, belts, boots, whatever you need to if you are injured. Now, it does have this really nice kind of trapezoidal slide, rather than having it rounded off. They machined it to have nice hard flat edges all the way around, as you can see right here, and I think it looks really good. I love the way that this gun actually looks. And also on the slide, and you'll note on the top strap, there is no serrations or anything to reduce glare, which I think with this finish and this sight setup isn't really necessary. It probably would have just added cost to the firearm. Overall, I think they did a pretty good job with the sighting arrangement and the slide shape. It also has a ported slide, but does not have a ported barrel, so it doesn't have a built-in compensator in there. But it does have a little less weight due to those lightning cuts that you can see right there. They are present on both sides. And it just, again, adds to the overall aesthetic of this gun. Now, it does not have forward slide serrations on this, which is something that I generally like. I do like slide serrations here and there in the front if they add to the aesthetic of the gun, but generally what I find is that they encourage you to put your hand near the muzzle of the weapon, which is never a good idea, and it drives the cost of manufacturing up. I can see a limited use for them if you are running a dot on your gun, but even then, I think the only time you're even going to be using them is when you chamber your first round. On a reload, you're going to be reloading from slide lock more than likely, so you don't really need them. I would say rear slide serrations are fine. Just get used to racking that first round into the chamber with your rear slide serrations if you have an optic, and call it a day. Speaking of rear slide serrations, there's only a few here. They match on both sides. They're fairly deep, but they are fairly wide. It's not the most tactile thing I've ever seen. You don't necessarily get a really good grip on it. That being said, they do work, and I didn't have any issues with them. Now, moving on to the front, there is one thing that I want to note here, and that this does not have a standard. Well, I should say it is the standard in the fact that it has a GI setup. It doesn't have a full-length guide rod, as you can see right here. It just is the standard sort of barrel bushing that you can see right there. So this is what I mean when I said like GI Spec Plus. That is a standard kind of 1911 GI setup. And I don't generally have any problems with it, but I would prefer a full-length guide rod assembly if I can get it. Moving back from there, we do have a 4-slot Picatinny rail on the bottom for lights, lasers, pistol bayonets, whatever kind of crazy accessories you want to put on there. And it's excellent. I did put a TLR 1HL Streamlight on this and shot it with it on there. I had no issues with the rail, and the finish held up surprisingly good. No marring, no scratching, no marking of any kind. Moving back from there, we do have a standard GI 1911 cutout, rounded trigger guard, and it has a slight undercut on the bottom of the trigger guard that you can see right there. And it just helps a little bit getting your hand just a little higher up on the gun, and it is pretty comfortable overall. Now, let's talk about our slide lock. It is a standard GI style of slide lock, which isn't a big deal for a 1911. I don't think you even need an extended one or an enlarged one at any point in time, just because you're gonna have to break your grip to hit that slide lock anyways. So when going to slide lock and reloading, you'll insert your magazine. I can't exactly show this on camera these days because of YouTube regulations, so I apologize for it. But when you insert your magazine, you'll then roll your thumb up to your slide lock with your offhand and release your slide. And it is quick, it is efficient, you just need a little bit of practice with it, but that's pretty typical for 1911s, Browning high powers, early Smith & Wesson semi-autos like the 6906 that I reviewed, the 5906, that kind of thing. So it does work. It worked perfectly fine. I didn't have any issues with it. Every time I hit the slide lock, the slide just dropped home, except for one instance, and I'll get into that when I get into reliability. Moving back from there, we do have a pretty nice ambidextrous extended thumb safety, which is located here on the frame. It's easy and intuitive to turn that on and off. It is fairly positive, maybe slightly on the soft side, but not that bad overall. Again, it is present on the other side of the weapon, the right side of the weapon. The one thing that I did note about it that I thought was a little weird is when using the thumb to turn the safety on, it is a single click, both top and bottom, so on and off. On the opposite side, on the right side of the firearm, I did note that when using that side, it's almost like a two-stage kind of affair, because as you can hear and see right here, it's kind of a two-click thing. You can power through it and get it down in one click, but you can hear right there that it just kind of gets caught a little bit sometimes, which doesn't happen when you use the frame safety on the left side of the firearm. Now, the hammer is a kind of commander skeletonized style of hammer. We do also have the extended beaver tail to go with that. It is serrated. I didn't have any issues with the hammer whatsoever. No breakages, no cracking, nothing like that. And here's a good close-up of the rear side of the firearm. Now, the beaver tail is really quite good. And what I mean by that is sometimes certain 1911s, it's pretty rare, but it does happen occasionally. The hammer won't impinge upon your grip safety, so you cannot manually decock it if you so choose. On this one, it's not a problem. It does interact quite well with your grip safety, so you can decock it or uncock it manually should you so choose. Now, when it comes to the beaver tail, we're going to get kind of into the weeds here. The beaver tail has this speed bump on the back to more positively engage your grip safety, and it is excellent on this firearm. Not only does it work very well, but it also, oh boy, here we go, solves the problem of an arched mainspring housing. So when the 1911 was first introduced, it had this flat arched mainspring housing that you can see on this particular one. You see on a lot of modern 1911s these days. The problem was it caused the firearm to shoot low. Later on in 1933, when the 1911A1 came out, this was switched to an arched mainspring housing to change the point of impact, and it worked. Then in the 1980s, some competition shooters started experimenting with their grip safeties and adding this bump to more positively engage it, allowing the gun to fire. And what some of them noted is if it was machined properly, it solved that problem of the mainspring housing, so they could use a flat mainspring housing rather than an arched one. Manufacturers took note, they started producing these, and then going back to the flat mainspring housing. Now, sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. I have shot 1911s that have this extended beaver tail speed bump grip safety with a flat mainspring housing, and hey, what do you know, it shot low, and then when putting in an arched mainspring housing, it solved that problem. That wasn't an issue with this particular 1911. They did it perfectly. Point of aim is point of impact, so the flat mainspring housing rather than the arched one isn't a problem on this particular 1911, which I love. Speaking of the mainspring housing, it is textured on the back, and it also has a flared magwell built into it. So here's a good look at your texturing on the back right here. And then if you look at the bottom, you'll note that it is a one-piece housing, and it has this wonderfully good flared magwell. It's flared on three sides, and it definitely helped with those quick reloads. I don't think this is something that's necessary on a double stack kind of gun like a Glock or something like that, because you have a double stack single feed mag and a nice wide magazine well to insert the mag in. But when you have a single stack gun, it can be a little more difficult to insert the magazine if you don't have that. So this is a really nice feature to the gun that I really liked, and I didn't have any problems reloading the firearm whatsoever. It worked really, really well. Now, let's talk about our magazine release. It is checkered in nature. It is extended, meaning it comes out further from the frame than a standard one, and it is perfect. It actually goes really, really well with these machined aluminum grips that the pistol comes with. They're kind of a wedge style grip, as you can see right here. And I didn't have any problems per se with the grip. They look kind of smooth, like they'd be hard to hold on to and mitigate recoil. However, they actually work really well at mitigating recoil, and they give you a better grip than you would expect. So I do like them, and I do like the way they look, and yes, they do extend all the way down to your flared magwell. So the fitment is really good. The only issue I had with the grips was a couple of times during live fire. The screws backed out and I had to tighten them back up. A little bit of Loctite, you should be fine. Now, the front strap is also textured. It matches the back strap of the gun as well, or I should say the mainspring housing, as you can see right there. Really good texturing on it. It does help with recoil mitigation and provides more traction a little bit. I wanted to see if there was much of a difference with or without it, so I did end up putting on a Pachmayr signature combat grip on this guy for a little while. And while that does provide a little bit more traction, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. It wasn't like I constantly had to readjust my grip while firing the pistol, so the texturing definitely does help along with the wedge style grips. Overall, pretty good. Now, let's talk about our trigger. But before we get into our trigger, remember there is, of course, Patreon. So if you'd like to see more content like that, go over there, sign up. $1 a month goes a long way with ammunition, targets, anything that I need to keep the channel running. It all goes to that. If you already are a member of Patreon, thank you very, very much. With that being said, let's talk about the trigger. It is a single action trigger only. It is a flat face trigger. It has some serrations on the front. See if we can get a shot of that right there. But yeah, vertical striations right here on the trigger, and pretty good overall. The trigger breaks right about at 4.5 pounds. It's a pretty good trigger, as 1911s are known for having good triggers. This is no exception. It has a pretty good trigger. It is not adjustable, which is something that I would generally like in a 1911. Again, it's another box that I'd like to have checked. This one doesn't, but still, overall, pretty good trigger. We'll give you a close-up on that one so you can see what I'm talking about. Here's the reset. Short, crisp, and it pushes your finger forward, so definitely a fast-firing gun. If you choose to fire it that quickly, yeah, right at about 4.5 pounds. So not a bad trigger at all on a 1911. One more time. Here's your reset, and there's your break. Pretty good trigger. Again, typical for 1911s. Now, the magazines. This gun came with 2 8-round Mech-Gar magazines. Really nice follower for 1911s. For the magazines, it does extend all the way to the front of the magazine, and I had no reliability issues with these magazines. I also used a couple of Wilson Combat mags, and those worked quite well. And I will obviously show you what comes in the box, but that comes in the box with a few other things. Now, disassembly, reassembly. Normally, I would do disassembly, reassembly, but YouTube is ridiculous with its regulations these days. But needless to say, this firearm disassembles and reassembles just like any other GI 1911 that's out there. There are plenty of videos out there, so go and watch one of those if you're looking for it. Machine work on the inside is impeccable. It's very smooth. There's barely any machining marks. The quality is there as far as the machine work goes. Now, let's talk about accuracy. 1-inch groups were no problem with this gun. You know, if you took your time under slow fire, you could do that. If you picked up the pace a little bit to more of a traditional, realistic self-defense pace, 2 inches were fairly typical. So it is an accurate gun. And that was with a variety of ammunition, Winchester, Sauer and Bellet, Federal. Accuracy was very consistent across the board. Now, let's talk about reliability. And this is the point of contention I have for this firearm. During my time, it's a 500 round test. I allow for 1 failure. If it has 2 or more, it fails the reliability portion of my testing. This gun actually had 4 failures in 500 rounds. Now, I'm not going to entirely blame the firearm for that one. One of them was an old mag that I've had problems with in the past, and I just threw it in the bag, didn't think about it, had a malfunction. So I'm willing to discount that. That takes us down to 3 malfunctions in 500 rounds. Now, one of those malfunctions was with 185 grain jacketed hollow point ammunition from Sauer and Bellet. 1911s are pretty finicky with hollow point ammunition. You need to have good rounds and good mags. These Mech-Gar mags are really good for hollow points. That being said, I would recommend that you use something like Hornady Critical Duty or Critical Defense, Corbons, something that has that plastic insert in the hollow point to make it perform like an FMJ as far as chambering. I'm sure it would have been better with those than it was with just these standard wide cavity hollow points that I was using. Again, 1911s are finicky when it comes to hollow points. You have to use specific ones, so I'm willing to discount that one. Know your weapon, know the ammunition. So I'm willing to discount that one. That brings us down to 2 failures in 500 rounds. Now, what happened with those failures? One was a failure to eject. The brass simply did not come anywhere near close to clearing the ejection port. It looked like initially the slide was locked back like this, and there was a case that was stuck perfectly horizontally on top of a live round, and it just didn't eject for whatever reason. So that one is a hard failure. I had to kind of clear the weapon and then go back to firing. The other one was a very small failure. It was simply a failure to go into battery, and a simple failure to feed. It was with FMJ ammunition, and what happened was I hit the slide lock during a reload like you typically would, and it just didn't feed the round in. I didn't even have to tap and rack. All I did was, I didn't tap and rack, but I did rack the gun. So it would be locked back like this. I looked, saw that it was just kind of hung up, racked it, and it chambered the round, and then I continued firing from there. That being said, it did have those malfunctions, and it did have 2. Only one I think was really an issue. The other one I wouldn't say was catastrophic. However, I would say that it did fail the reliability testing, the reliability portion of the testing, and so I'm not all that impressed with its reliability. I do really like the gun and all of the features overall. I like the way it looks. I like how everything's forged. I like how it's Series 70's internals. It has that front night sight. It has that pick rail. It has nice grips. Flared magwell. I adore the flared magwell on this. It made reloading so quick and intuitive. The trigger's good. Accuracy's good. It just wasn't there for reliability, which is a little disappointing. I really wanted to like this gun a lot, and unfortunately I don't think I'll be keeping it because I can't trust it. Now, with all that being said, does it check all the boxes for me? No, it doesn't. I should have a rear night sight with the tritium inserts. I do like a commander model more than a standard one. I would like a full-length guide rod. I would like suppressor height sights. I would like it to be cut for an optic. And that would basically take you to where you need to be for a very modern 1911. But like I said, they're prohibitively expensive. And your mileage may vary with this firearm. You could pick this up and have no reliability issues with it whatsoever. This is only a sample size of 1. So if you're interested in it, yeah, go ahead and pick one up, try it out at the range, whatever, what have you. But be advised, I had reliability issues with the gun. Do I think it's worth the money? I think you get a lot of bang for your buck with this firearm, pun intended. The reliability really broke my heart. But I think if you're not scared to spend a little bit of money or just try it out at a range, and you find yours to be reliable, I'd say it's very much worth the money. I mean, these are features that typically will cost you $1,300 to $1,500, maybe even more, to get all these features on a lot of 1911s. So I am impressed with the features overall on the firearm for the price point of $750. Again, it just comes back to the reliability for me. So I hope you enjoyed this review of the Tisas Night Stalker 1911. This has been Aaron with Ghost Raptor Gaming and Guns. Thank you for tuning in. Have a nice day.